Characters. Elements of fiction. A character is any person, personal, identity, or entity, whose existence originates from a fictional work or performance. The people in a narrative are called characters. The author creates characters and presents his or her story through the actions and words of these characters. Characters are the people, animals, or lifelike objects in a story. Since the author makes up the characters, they can be anything he or she wishes, from real-life humans to aliens to talking cars. Example: in Persia, there lived two brothers, Casimir and Ali Baba. Brothers they were, but as different as day and night. Casimir, the older brother, married a rich woman, though she was often mean to him and others. He became a wealthy merchant. But Ali Baba married a sweet girl, who was very, very poor. Love he had, but he had to work hard, cutting wood and selling it in the marketplace. Each character, like those in Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, and other stories, has special traits or qualities. One character may be tall, angry, and dishonest. Another may be gentle, thoughtful, and heroic. Having a variety of characters in a story makes it more interesting. The author's characterization, or means of developing a character so that they seem real, greatly affects one's attitude toward individual characters and toward the story as a whole. Characters may simply be described, or they may reveal themselves through dialogue and action. Basically, in a prose fictional narrative, there are two major characters: the protagonist and the antagonist. There are other characters too. They include the minor or supporting characters. The minor or supporting characters are involved in fewer actions or incidents in the work. Their roles are just to support the major characters in propelling the plot of the story. Characters are developed through appearance, words, feelings, and reaction of others. Characters in fiction can be conveniently classified as major character, minor character, static character, dynamic character. A major character is an important figure at the center of the story's action or theme. The major character is sometimes called a protagonist, whose conflict with an antagonist may spark the story's conflict. Supporting the major characters are one or more secondary or minor characters whose function is partly to illuminate the major characters. Minor characters are often static or unchanging. They remain the same from the beginning of a work to the end. Dynamic characters, on the other hand, exhibit some kind of change of attitude, purpose, behavior, as the story progresses. There are two meanings for the word character. 1. The person in a work of fiction. 2. The characteristics of a person. Persons in a work of fiction. Antagonist and protagonist. Short stories use few characters. One character is clearly central to the story, with all major events having some importance to this character. He or she is the protagonist. The opposer of the main character is called the antagonist. 2. The characteristics of a person. In order for a story to seem real to the reader, its characters must seem real. Characterization is the information the author gives the reader about the characters. The author may reveal a character in several ways. A. His or her physical appearance. B. What he or she says, thinks, feels and dreams. C. What he or she does or does not do. D. What others say about him or her, and how others react to him or her. Protagonist. In most cases, one character stands out in the work and indeed attracts the reader's attention. It appears as if the story revolves around him or her, or that it is his or her story that is being told. That character becomes the driver of action in the story. She or he, therefore, is responsible for achieving the story's objective or goal. In many storytelling traditions, the protagonist is usually the main character, or the hero, heroine. Antagonist. You may deduce from the name who the antagonist is. In literal sense, he is someone who antagonizes. The character that stands constantly in opposition to the protagonist is the antagonist. He opposes the protagonist, or is pitted against him or her in all cases and situations. A character is a participant in the story, and is usually a person, but may be any personal identity, an animal or an entity, whose existence originates from the fictional work. The author is usually careful in the selection of these characters, and ensures that the role of each character is clear. Some characters are used and dispensed with, while others are active participants in the story, from the beginning to the end. The former are the minor characters, while the latter are the major characters. Characterization. Characterization is the process of revealing the personality of a character in a story, or a means by which writers present and reveal characters. By direct description, by showing the character in action, or by the presentation of other characters, who help to define each other. How these characters act, react, learn from their life situations, and how they change, constitutes the art of characterization. If a character moves us, and remains in our memory, we say that the characterization is powerful. A character grows slowly with the story, and as we read on, we start understanding him or her. We even become one with them, and participate at an emotional level, with the ups and downs of their fortunes. Herein lies the success of the art of characterization. Techniques of characterization are used in texts to enable readers to form a mental construct of a character. There are 6 main aspects to be considered. 1. How is the character described? 2. By whom is the character described? 3. How is the characterization distributed throughout the text? 4. How reliable is the source of information? 5. What do we learn about a character's inner life? And 6. In which arrangements of contrasts and correspondences is the character depicted? The most obvious technique of characterization is when someone, in the following excerpt, the narrator, tells us explicitly what a character is like.
Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world, with very little to distress or vex her.
A character is sometimes also characterized explicitly through a telling name. We also deduce character traits that are given implicitly through the character's actions, other characters' attitudes to him or her, etc. Characters can be described implicitly as well as explicitly, either by the narrator, called authorial characterization, or by another character in the narrative, also called figural characterization, or even by the characters themselves, self-characterization. The following gives an example for a characterization by narrator, combined with the narrator's representation of other characters' views. Explicitly, Mr. Snagsby is characterized as a shy, retiring man. It is also implied that his wife is neither shy nor retiring, and that he is rather tyrannized by Mrs. Snagsby. Mr. and Mrs. Snagsby are not only one bone and one flesh, but, to the neighbors' thinking, one voice too. That voice, appearing to proceed from Mrs. Snagsby alone, is heard in Cook's Court very often. Mr. Snagsby, otherwise than as he finds expression through these dulcet tones, is rarely heard. He is a mild, bald, timid man, with a shining head, and a scrubby clump of black hair sticking out at the back. He tends to meekness and obesity. He is emphatically a retiring and unassuming man. A further example. Miss Clack, the poor, religious cousin in The Moonstone, introduces herself, self-characterization, to the reader in the following terms.
I am indebted to my dear parents, both now in heaven, for having had habits of order and regularity instilled into me at a very early age. In that happy bygone time, I was taught to keep my hair tidy, at all hours of the day and night, and to fold up every article of my clothing carefully, in the same order, on the same chair, in the same place at the foot of the bed, before retiring to rest. An entry of the day's events in my little diary invariably preceded the folding up. The evening hymn, repeated in bed, invariably followed the folding up. and the sweet sleep of childhood invariably followed the evening hymn.
Characterization techniques. By the narrator. By a character. By another character. Self-characterization. By the narrator. Explicit. Character description or comment. Implicit. Report of character's actions and/or thought, description of outward appearance and circumstances, contrasts and correspondences. By a character. By another character. Explicit. Description or comment. Simultaneously implicit self-characterization. Implicit. As implied by choice of expression, and description of appearance and circumstances. Self-characterization. Explicit. Description or comment. Implicit. Use of language or gesture, expression, attitudes unconsciously expressed, characteristic props. Plot, or character-oriented narratives usually have one or more major, also main, characters, and any number of minor characters. The main character, especially when there is only one, is also called protagonist. The term protagonist has the advantage that it implies no value judgment, and can include heroes or heroines, that is, positive main characters, as well as anti-heroes and anti-heroines, that is, negative main characters. The protagonist is the character who dominates the narrative. In some narratives, the protagonist has an influential opponent, the antagonist, such as Voldemort in the Harry Potter novels, Sauron in The Lord of the Rings, or Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes. Supporting the major character are one or more secondary or minor characters, whose function is partly to illuminate the major characters. Minor characters are often static or unchanging, they remain the same, from the beginning of a work to the end. Dynamic characters, on the other hand, exhibit some kind of change of attitude, purpose, behavior, as the story progresses. Minor characters can serve as witnesses, namely, someone reporting on the events, though not directly involved, thus achieving something of an objective report. An important function of minor characters is to serve as foil characters. A foil is a piece of shiny metal put under gemstones, to increase their brightness. A foil character, thus, provides a contrast to highlight the features of the main character. Another function of a minor character can be that of confidant, that is, a close friend of the protagonist, to whom he or she can confide in, and thus disclose his or her innermost thoughts. Minor characters, not surprisingly, often remain monodimensional, and/or static. This means that the narrative text presents only few, or even just one characteristic of such characters, monodimensional, and that there is little or no development throughout the narrative, static. Such monodimensional characters can often be reduced to types, representatives of a single and stereotyped character category. The wicked stepmother, faithful servant, miserly old man, profligate youth, etc. Forster's term flat comprises both the aspect of monodimensional and static. Major characters are more frequently multidimensional and dynamic, though not as a rule. A multidimensional character, or round, as Forster calls it, as the word suggests, has a number of defining characteristics, sometimes conflicting ones, and such characters often undergo a development throughout the narrative, dynamic. The flat characters are those characters who remain the same in the course of the story, from the beginning to the end. Some scholars refer to them as static characters. They do not undergo significant changes during the course of a story. In the real sense, they are not affected by circumstances around them, and are usually very rigid in their belief. Many of them are usually tragic characters, because they are prepared to pursue any goal they believe in, to its perceived, logical conclusion, even at the risk of losing their lives. Round characters are those characters that grow in the course of the narration. Most of the time, they grow from innocence to maturity and adapt to situations accordingly. They respond to changes in their environment and react differently to different situations. Characterization, process by which fictional characters are presented or developed. Character development, the change that a character undergoes from the beginning of a story to the end. Anthropomorphic characterization, the characterization of animals, inanimate objects, or natural phenomena as people. Thank you. Have a good day.